evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. This is episode number 250. And with me, I have a very, very special guest that's joining me. He is an author, a film instructor, a director, and an attorney, and he is Mr. Adam Nimoy. Adam, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Adam, and thank you for being here on the show. It's an honor to have you on. And before I even get started, I just want to say I want to give a huge thank you to my dear friends Bonnie Moss and Edwin Thrower for helping me to coordinate with you to have you on the show, because it is because of them. So again, thank you to them, and very excited to have you on and just to have a great discussion with you.
I'm looking forward to it, Roy. Thank you.
Thank you. Want to say hi to some of the folks that are tuning in. I see my friend Vince is out there. He's tuning in from Stewartsville, New Jersey. Welcome, Vince. I see my wife is tuning in also. She's downstairs. She's saying, hi, Adam. Thank you for being on the show. Can't wait to read your book. And Edwin is out there, and he's saying, hi, Adam. And Randy Lee is joining us from Wisconsin. He's saying good evening. And he said, wow, what a great guest. And he also said, Edwin said, also good to see you, Adam. Vince is saying, welcome. I see John Dowling is joining in, saying, hi, Adam. Nice to meet you.
Oh, I see Bonnie Moss is on.
Yep. Bonnie is out there saying hi. Also, Don Bethman is joining us. Donnie's joining us from Delaware. Welcome, Donnie. And Dennis Chevalier is also joining us, and he's joining us from Canada. Welcome, Dennis. And also William is out there. Welcome, William. Great to see everybody out there. And also Lou is joining us from Rhode Island, and he's saying also hello too.
Hello, Lou.
Jeff Rubel is joining us from Utah, saying hello.
Yep.
And let me see. I think we got everybody covered. And yeah, we'll definitely get started. Adam, I just have to say, I'm going to get my Star Trek notes out of the way, just to say I was a classic Star Trek fan from the 1970s. I've been a fan of the series ever since, and having the opportunity to have you on to talk about your book is great. And I have to say, I really appreciated your book because it really just opens the doors in regards to being able to relate, and also just hearing your personal story, and you really get very personal with it. So it's very emotional, and there's so many layers to it. So right up front, I want to say thank you for, writing such a detailed and a personal book and sharing it with especially the fans of Star Trek and your dad, obviously.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. It was a long time in coming. It's a little bit of a riff on what I was doing with the documentary For the Love of Spock. Talked a little bit about some of the ups and downs of being the son of Leonard Nimoy, and the book is sort of a more, explores that relationship in a little more detail. And I had to be, I just want to say up front, I had to be very careful about the way I wrote the book, because my dad has millions of adoring fans all over the world, as you know. And most people don't want to hear, a bunch of dirty laundry about one of their iconic heroes, nor do I, for that matter. And so I think it's a real celebration of the fact that we overcame a lot to be able to have a close and loving relationship the last 7 years of my dad's life. I mean, I always admired my dad, and I was always proud of him. And that's something I also am very clear to point out in the book, that despite our problems, I was always, very much on his team and supportive of him, and very just incredibly proud of what he had accomplished.
Yeah, and that definitely comes through in your book, just with your words and, everything that you experienced, growing up, and really going back. And it really starts with your grandparents, your dad's parents, because if my understanding is, they were immigrants from the Ukraine that came over, and then they settled in Boston. And really, that's really the beginnings of where all this takes place, and how everything kind of forms with your dad and everything that he did growing up, and his relationship with his parents, and how that formed him as a person, and the different things that he had to endure.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about the fact that my dad and I were from very different generations, different worlds, different planets, sometimes I like to say. We were definitely on different planets because my dad's upbringing was so different. The story does begin with my grandparents emigrating from Ukraine. I mean, they consider themselves Russians, but they were living in a village in what is now Ukraine. And you have to imagine the culture shock they went through. They came from a very small village with no paved roads,
Yeah.
and then ended up in downtown Boston, right in the heart of Boston, the West End. And big culture shock for them. And my dad would say they were never really the demonstrative type of people. They were never kind of warm and touchy feely and the kind that give you hugs. My dad had to grow up very fast on the streets of Boston during the Depression. He was born in 31. And when he was 10 years old, he was selling newspapers on the Boston Common and just hustling to generate money, always working, not a great student, not an academic career was not in the works for him, which put him at odds with his parents because they really wanted him to live their idea of the American dream, which was to go to college and get a degree and become a professional of some sort.
Right. And that really had to be tough on your dad in regards to that. Before I move on, Adam, I just wanted to say hi to Sue. Sue's joining us from Massachusetts. She's just commenting, and she said, "What an incredible pleasure to see you. I met you and Julie at Mission, New York in 2016. It was a delight chatting with you for a couple of minutes." Vince also said how much he enjoyed your documentary that you did. And Randy is saying, we really want to hear about everything in regards to the story of your life. Also want to say hi to Jenny, who's joining us from Australia. Welcome, Jenny. Great to see you out there. And also, as Bonnie is pointing out, your book is The Most Human. And I will be talking a little bit more about that and directing folks to your website a little later. But yes, just want to make sure that that's put out there as well. And the village and the area that your grandparents were living and where your dad grew up, I mean, essentially there was a lot of different ethnicities there too, as well, right? In regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, it was an immigrant neighborhood. It was called the West End of Boston, and it was filled with a lot of Russian Jews who were, in a big movement out of Russia, particularly out of the western side of Russia, due in large part to violence against the Jews, pogroms we called them. That's what they were called. And then there were a number of Irish and Italians also. My dad said you could tell the ethnicity of the apartment by the smell of the food they were making. Everybody was making their own dinner, and it was quite distinctive. So it was a very colorful, rich culturally, ethnically background, but it was also very insulated and isolated.
Right. So for him to, at the age of 18, he made the decision and he went out to California and really didn't have the support, as you were just saying, in regards to your grandparents, because they had other plans as far as for what, he was going to do. And he ventured out. He had saved money. Your dad was a very hard worker in regards to the different types of jobs that he did. I know in the book you mentioned too, he did everything from selling vacuum cleaners. He had, selling newspapers, working in card stores, just any type of work that he can get. I mean, he was a hustler.
Yeah, one of the many differences between us, because he was desperate to survive. He had no economic safety net to fall back on. His parents would not help him out when he came out here at a very young age. And and I remember because between 56 when I was born and 66 when Star Trek went on the air, he was really on the big hustle to support a family of four.
Right.
And he was one of the things he did that I loved was he had this corner on a market of setting up fish tanks. It was a big fad in the 60s. All these doctors' offices in their waiting rooms, they wanted fish tanks because it immediately calmed the patients down, and just made them easier to deal with. So my dad and we always had fish tanks, aquariums in our house. So dad was setting those up and maintaining them. And I remember he was working, he had these gumball machines that he used to service. And he worked in a pet store. He scooped ice cream. He drove a cab. He managed an apartment building. He was teaching acting class for a while. I mean, my dad was a hustler. That was his whole thing. But as a result of that, family life was not a really big priority for him because he simply didn't have the time or really the luxury. And that's why my sister and I were pretty lucky that our mother was very, in tune and holding down the fort and very supportive of my dad and the warm and fuzzy loving person that we really needed because that was just not my dad's makeup to begin with. And because he was so busy trying to earn the money to keep us going, it was, just didn't have the time to
Right.
focus on the family.
Yeah, and in regards to your mom, she really was really the one that was really keeping you culturally connected, I should say, because I remember reading that in regards to, I guess, bringing you to see the Beatles, in regards to your sister, Julie, seeing, different concerts. So really there was that connection that she was dealing with and different, different persona, but your mom was there to support your dad and doing those different jobs. And he was in episodic television, really making his means as an actor. But then when Star Trek came along, there was almost like a big shift because of the popularity and how Star Trek really escalated and was becoming widely known. I mean, in the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, you had said too that I guess in regards to fan mail was being sent directly to your house. You could actually look up in the phone book back when we had phone books. I know it feels like in the last 10 years, it's not something that we deal with right now anymore because everything's on the internet. But up until about 10 years or so ago, you could look up back in the 60s before Star Trek, made its way. You could look up your dad's name and address in the phone book. And then also, really he was only like, a phone call away, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, the real problem wasn't the phone book. It was 16 magazine.
Mm.
It was a very popular fan magazine of that period. And they accidentally, published our home address as the mailing address for fan mail. And that's when things started to change pretty quick. We started getting sacks of mail, and I mean, we're just inundated with letters. And it's so cool. You just want to open all of them, but there's simply not enough time. We were doing that for a while, and then Dad finally turned it over to a service to help out with that. But then people were showing up, and then the paparazzi were there. We had a lot of photographers coming all the time, and we were in the Christmas parade on Hollywood Boulevard that year. I mean, everything changed very, very quickly. It was quite a contrast to the life we were living before Star Trek went on the air. Yes, it was. Spock was almost immediately, recognized and popular, and people glommed onto him for good reason. But it was nice to remember what it was like beforehand because we really enjoyed the ride at that point.
Right. And really that would take away from time for you. And as you said, you were born in 1956. So really at that age, 10 years, being 10 years old is really an impressionable age where having those strong memories and, interacting with your parents. I mean, those are things that you need to remember. And really with him working during the week and working those long hours and then coming home and then eating dinner and then running the lines with your mom. And she was very supportive of him doing that.
Yeah.
And then the day would just start all over again. And then for the weekends, doing special appearances too, because he was traveling, promoting the show. And that would take away from time that being spent with you and your sister.
Yeah, look, yeah. I mean that's all true. We made a lot of sacrifices, and he was very in tune with his career, and he was trying to really keep things going. He made a lot of personal appearances on the weekends. It was fast cash for him. It was a very exciting time for him. Actually, he was making these records. Mr. Spock's Music from Outer Space, which I loved. He was doing a lot of different things. To keep the ball rolling and to promote the show, and that's just part of the gig, and it's a fan based industry, so you have to really pay attention to the fans. And my dad was always very courteous with them, but they were invading some of our privacy. It's very difficult to be out in public with my dad because we couldn't have a meal together, and I couldn't do any of the father son outings that we used to do. It was very awkward with him anyway because I never had a really close relationship with him. But the minute we go out in public, people would want autographs. So there's two sides to all that. But my dad understood it was a fan-based business, and I think many people who are listening can whoever have ever met him. I'm sure Bonnie can attest to this. He's a very courteous, kind, patient man with the fans.
Yeah.
And it took away from his attention to my sister and myself. There's no doubt about that. But the fact is, Roy, I would never swap what happened for anything. I mean, I would do it all over again and make the sacrifices we made, because we just had such a great life. It was
Right.
just so much fun, and we were so proud of him. I mean, who doesn't love Spock?
Oh my.
I travel all over the world, and I see images of Spock everywhere, and it's very heartwarming. It's very, it's really reaffirming of the impact that he made on people.
I have to say, and I'm just to share a personal story. My wife and I, we went to a Star Trek convention. It was probably about maybe 15 years ago. I think it was in 2009, 15, 16 years ago. And when we were actually walking in the corridor, there were two, there's the exit and then there's the entrance. And as we were coming up on the exit, folks were coming out of the room, and they were so just like dazed and had such a nice smile. They were just like, they were just like in awe. It was just like they saw something so wonderful, and they were just like in such a relaxed state. And this wasn't just like one or two people that were coming out. We were seeing it, consistently, because there was the flow of traffic. And then when we walked in and then we met him, he put his arms out and he said, welcome, welcome, come over. And, he was just like, nice to meet you, how you doing and everything. And it just reaffirms everything you said in regards to the fans and everything. And it's an experience I'll never forget. But just kind of connecting to you what you just you said, and it resonates to this day.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I'm at a convention in Las Vegas, I mean, people are just so glad to meet me, and it's so lovely because I'm still kind of basking in this afterglow of Leonard's legacy, and they feel like they're connecting to some DNA of Leonard when they shake my hand. And everybody, when they recognize me, they just light up, and it's really wonderful. And this book tour, I've been promoting this book, The Most Human, for the past 6-7 months all over the country, and people are just so just have such great memories of my dad. They have that Spock and Leonard had such a great impact on their lives, and it's nice to see that even now. Somebody said, don't you ever get tired of it when people are talking about your dad, or how much they love Leonard or Spock? And I'm like, no, I never get tired of it. It's just wonderful. My daughter just delivered my granddaughter, her first child, and the doctor is a Trek fanatic. We got him a signed picture. I mean, it's just everywhere, and it's been a great experience.
Well, congratulations in regards to your granddaughter.
Thank you.
Very, very special. And that's great to hear that her doctor was a Star Trek fan, and there again, there's that connection. I just want to say hi to May. She's joining us from Canada. Welcome, May. And also, let me just see. I'm just seeing one more comment that just came through. Warren is also joining us from Canada. I just want to say hi to Warren too. And one question that just came through, William just asked, and he said, I'm curious whether Adam can actually watch his dad's performances and forget that he's his dad. Can he actually suspend his own disbelief when he watches his dad?
Yeah, that happened on a number of occasions, actually, mostly in the theater, because in the 70s, after Dad finished Mission Impossible, he went really deep into theater work, something he'd always wanted to do. And there were a couple of plays, number of plays really, where you just forget it's Leonard. You just lose yourself in the performance. One was Fiddler on the Roof. He was phenomenal. Musical theater. 1971, we did a tour on the East Coast in the North Shore of Massachusetts, on the Cape, and in Rochester, New York, and we were in Toledo, Ohio. That was phenomenal. That very easy to forget he was my father. And then in 70, let's see, and then he did Man in the Glass Booth and Equus on Broadway in 1977. Well, Glass Booth was 71, the fall of 71, phenomenal. And I talk about that in the documentary for The Love of Spock. But Equus on Broadway in 77, he followed Anthony Perkins. There are many great actors who are in that role on Broadway. And, I saw Dad 4 or 5 different performances of that. He was phenomenal. So, yeah, there's times where you just forget because he's so good and so in it and so into his craft, he was just fabulous. And sometimes I would ask my dad how he manages to really keep it going and the enthusiasm. And he was always in the moment. And he would say, if the material is good enough, you always find something new to play, or someone else is feeding you a line on stage. You've got to be ready for it. And he's just so in the moment. And he was very much like hard to recognize as my own dad.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, as an actor, I mean, what a compliment. I mean, and that's just the whole thing. It's just being able to suspend that disbelief because, you know, he's his portrayal coming through, and just seeing him in different productions. I mean, he was an incredible actor. Just want to say hi to Linda. She's also joining us from Canada. She's saying hello too. But in regards to progressing in as you got older, though, and then you had your teen years, and then, you know, when you were in, you know, you were doing smoking pot. I mean, you clearly said that you were a pothead, you know, and what have you. And then your dad was dealing with.
Blame it on them. Blame it on the dad.
And you know, just dealing with those issues, and then kind of going, you know, head to head with your dad, and it caused a lot of friction in regards to that. And that must have had to be, you know, very hard on you, as well as, you know, with everything. And you get very personal in the book as far as talking about that, and it's almost like you're really just kind of butting heads, and it's like a misunderstanding really of each other.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my dad, look, we had a very awkward relationship when I was a kid, and then when I became a teenager, we just got into a lot of conflict, a lot of verbal conflict with one another. And it was, you know, this went on for many years, and it was just made worse by his alcoholism, something he admitted to in an interview with Bill Shatner, no less. And my weed smoking, you know, I'm your run of the mill pothead for 30 years. You know, I just wanted to party and have a good time. And it was a good time in the 70s, particularly, you know, that was really the decade of the Grateful Dead, and following them around and going to shows and stuff. I mean, I was still very directed. I was still very much like my dad. I had goals, career goals. I was determined to stay in school and go to law school. I did all that, but I was just a high functioning pothead, much like Leonard was a high functioning alcoholic. And it just became a very toxic relationship, ups and downs to I mean, really, you know, Roy, I characterized my relationship with my dad as this weird combination of amazing experiences coupled with a lot of just really unfortunate conflict with him, where we just could not, you know, find some way to resolve our differences.
Right. Trying to be in alignment, and it just wasn't coming through. I just saw one of Bonnie's just asking a question. She said, "Do you still have your license to practice law? Did this career inform your writing or directing style in any way?"
Well, yeah, I mean, look, you know, the first book they have you read in law school is Plain English for Lawyers. You know, they want you to write briefs in plain English and not a lot of legalese. So, I mean, that's always very helpful. Yeah, I still have my law license. I'm on the inactive list with the State Bar in California. I'm glad I went to law school. I'm glad I practiced law for 7 years. But after 7 years of practicing, it was clear to me that I just wanted to be doing what my dad was doing, which was storytelling on film. I really wanted to learn more about film. And I was lucky at that point. We were having, you know, our relationship was okay to the point where he was willing to help me, and did. He helped me get jobs, and he helped educate me as to what filmmaking was all about. So that also helped. And, you know, it's storytelling. That also informed my writing, which I've been doing since I was a kid. I've been journaling all my life. I've always wanted to be a writer. But, you know, when you're working with storytelling, even in a visual medium, it helps you really kind of get down to the brass tacks of what it is you're trying to say, and what's the theme that you're trying to focus on, and being just very clear about how to communicate this. A lot of this I learned from my dad. A lot of this I learned from writing, you know, term papers in college. And a lot of it is just from journaling. All of my life, I've been doing that. So, you know, it's not something that just recently came to me. I mean, and I worked hard on this book too. I mean, I really worked. And I hired an editor to help me, because it's very difficult to know when you're writing a memoir about what's appropriate and what should I leave on the, you know, editing room floor, and what should we expand on. And I was working with a woman who was in the publishing industry for many years in New York, and she knew nothing about Star Trek. And that was perfect for me. I hired her on the spot because
Sure.
I don't, you know, I want her to have more of an objective viewpoint of what works and what doesn't.
Right.
You know, and where, you know, and being careful to tell the truth about my relationship with my dad, but not tell everything.
Right.
And at the same time, also be very clear about the fact that I love the guy, I was proud of the guy. He had to work his ass off, and family was not his priority in the beginning. And his parents were not great for modeling on how to parent somebody. So, these are all things I needed. These are all things you learn to try to tell a story that will resonate with people, which seems to be happening. I hope it's happening.
Well, I have to say, Adam, my draw to read your book obviously was because it's, your dad is Leonard Nimoy, and the interest was there because of that, feeling that connection, loving Star Trek for watching it since like probably 1972 for like the last 52 years. However, getting into it and really you're unraveling everything, and just it's really identifying your family as a family. It's almost like you're taking the Star Trek element, and you're not taking it away, but you just kind of push. And my interpretation was just it's being put aside, and you're dealing about the human aspect, which is very appropriate in regards to the title of your book, the most human, because it's what families can deal with, what everyday families can go through. And it really was no different. So for me, everybody that reads your book is going to be able to relate on some manner. For me personally, I had that connection because of my dad's parents, which immigrated from Sweden. They came over, and they came to New Jersey, and loving, I know they love my dad, and love my uncle, and loved my the family. However, it's just that when it came to expressing it, showing it, they weren't very demonstrative. However, with my mom's side, which my great grandparents came over from Italy, they were different. They were very touchy feely, very loving. And I know my mom's out there, so I'm going to say hi to my mom. And and it's just that I was able to have that connection, and I really appreciated that, because it really just, at 56, 50, yeah, I wish I was 56, at 58 years old, I can, tap into that. And then when you go through, your life, and then the different layers, it's just those connections, and it just really resonated. So I just wanted to express that.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that the dysfunction that we experienced in our relationship and in our family is not uncommon. A lot
Right.
of families experience that. I hear this all the time about, dads that were not present, that were Depression era kids that were focused on their career, that were not that touchy feely. The only difference is that my dad happened to be very famous. That's really the only factor that makes it any different. In the end, we're just an American family trying to struggle through some of the issues that we have. It is not
Exactly.
all that different. And it's interesting you say it, because my mother's parents were very demonstrative and loving and affectionate and touchy-feely. And the interesting thing about my dad's parents that always fascinated me was that, first of all, his mother wore the pants in the family. His mother ran the family. His dad was very in the background. His dad was a barber. He was a very passive guy, and he never said that much. It was always his mother who was very tough with him. Yet when Star Trek came on and Dad became famous, the fans started contacting her and my grandfather, and inviting them out and wanting to know about Leonard and sending them gifts. And my grandmother Dora, my dad's mother, would share like letters she was getting from the fans, and she would giggle about it. She was just so tickled by it, not really understanding why Star Trek was so popular. She just knew that there was all this love and adulation. But
Right.
even so, Roy, the weird thing was I never heard her say that she was proud of my dad, that she loved my dad. She did the best. She showed it as much as she could, but it
Right.
was very limited.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know my dad's not watching, but it's just it's tough. My dad expresses his love in different ways, but it's just that it's harder, and it really is. I guess my dad is 83. It's really I really feel it's a generational type of the upbringing that came, and it's from the culture, and it's amazing how that it happens in different families, and again, how you share that. And that was the immediate connection that I could feel when reading, your book. And it was nice to be able to have that connection just because, you're not alone, which is
Exactly.
I want to say hi to Henry. Henry is joining us. He's joining us from New York. He's saying, "Hi, Roy, Mr. Nimoy. Thanks for coming on the show. It's a treat and an honor. Loved your documentary For the Love of Spock."
Thank you, Henry. Thank you so much.
And Edwin is commenting. He's saying, "I see your dad's music in the background. Do you listen to his music often? And what's your favorite track that he recorded?"
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, here's the thing about Dad's music. I mean, it goes from the sublime to the ridiculous, really. I mean, I love that first album, Mr. Spock's. It's a great album. It's a great kind of like, just photographic shot of the time and the era and of Spock and where he was at. Some of the stuff he did was not very good. He was not a great singer. He was fabulous in musical theater, but as a recording artist, he was, it was a little challenging, and some of it was novelty, even though he made 4 or 5 albums. But there was one cut. There's a couple of cuts that I love. One is called "Love Is Sweeter." I believe it's on like the touch of Leonard Nimoy. I don't know which one is. I got to look it up. "Love Is Sweeter" is the track. I never remember which album it's on, but there's a number of tracks that I like that he cut. And I was in the studio with him on a number of occasions when they were making these records, and that was really a treat for me as well. He had a great producer, Charles Randolph Grion. This guy from New York came out and just became a lifelong family friend and did a great job of producing the records. And it was, it was great being at these record stores. There's some pictures of me, like at Wallach's Music City. The place is mobbed with people. It was just crazy trying to get an album signed by my dad. So, it was really of a time, and it was great that he did that, and he was undaunted in doing these things. He would make these personal appearances and take his guitar with him and sing in front of audiences. I mean, I would go with him and I just think, this guy's got guts, because, he was undaunted. I mean, he did not have the greatest singing voice, but he was good and he was entertaining. And that was my dad.
That's so awesome. That really, really is.
Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that, Adam. William is commenting. He's saying, "Adam, your relationship with your dad sounds so similar to my own. Dad was a beloved doctor, and that was his first priority, not me or my family. It was difficult for us."
Yeah, I mean, I hear that a lot from people who have dads in very specific types of professions, like the medical profession, or like dads who are in the the business world or in the finance world. That they became very renowned or built reputations for themselves. But these, all these professions require a lot of focus and a lot of dedication, and a lot of sacrifices for the family. That's just the way it is for a lot of people. That there's not that much balance sometimes when you have a career that's very demanding. For me, even TV directing was very demanding. This is why it really took a toll on my family life, which kind of led to my divorce, really, in that family, because when I changed careers and started directing TV all over the country, I was just gone all the time. It's very long hours away on the set, and or out of town, and when you don't have that balance. I did try to have it when I was an attorney, where I'd have a 9-to-5 job because I was trying to work in corporate, in the corporate world. And when you're in the law firm business, it ain't no 9-to-5. You got to come up with your billable hours, and sometimes it's very challenging. But I tried to. This is the thing that I did differently with my kids, is I had some balance. I mean, I had career goals, but I was also very determined to be a part of my children's upbringing, to be there for them, to do stuff with them, hang out with them. They were born in LA, like I was born in LA, and we liked the same type of stuff. So I was helping my kids with their homework and taking my daughter to her music lessons and her tutor, and taking my son Jonah to his music lessons, and going out surfing with him. It was a very different type of relationship. Yet still, I made my own mistakes as a parent, and still they found plenty of reasons to be pissed off at me.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I mean, again, we're only human, and that's what it comes down to. There's going to be things that happen, and you do talk in great depth about your relationship with your children in the book, and that is a question that that William was asking, which just covered upon that. And in regards to now, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but now Maddie is working for Paramount. Am I?
Yeah.
currently, right?
Yes, that's correct. She has been there for 8 years. Maddie had a very good academic career. She was at Bard College in upstate New York, and then she immediately went to work on Person of Interest. It was, with the help of J.J. Abrams and my dad, she got herself a PA job on that show, and just stayed, just kept working and proving herself.
Right.
She's been at Paramount for 8 years now. She's a vice president of production and television.
That's
She actually
wonderful.
moved over to the CBS side, which is also part of the Paramount family. They're in major transition now. They're about to be taken over with new management, new ownership, and David Ellison. It should be interesting to see what they're going to do. But it's nice to see that my daughter has carried on the tradition. I mean, for a while she had an office right next to where my dad had an office when he was in Mission Impossible.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and we were there for the renaming of one of the streets on the lot at Paramount was renamed Leonard Nimoy Way. We were there when Maddie was working there, and we all celebrated out there, with a lot of people. It's really wonderful that it came kind of full circle. But again, it's like there is a lot of nepotism in Hollywood, but if you ain't got the goods, you can fail upwards. That does happen in Hollywood.
Sure.
But in Maddie's case, she's just very capable and very determined, and she's on maternity leave now, but she's going back because she's very good at what she does.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, you have to be able to sustain yourself, or else it's just not going to happen. And obviously, she has, and she's done very well, which is a credit to her. And I actually was at the Paramount tour. I think it was in May of 2023, and I actually got to see Leonard Nimoy's, your dad's, street named after him. So that was really, really cool as well.
Yeah.
I just want to say hi to my friend Bill. Bill Scrata is joining us from Harmony, New Jersey. Welcome, Bill. Good to see you out there. And then also, real quickly, too, your son, Jonah, who you said was really in the book very, very similar in regards to your dad, in regards to academia, really not being into, the whole thing in regards to college. And he's done very well, too, in regards to his music, which is, a credit to him as well.
Yeah, he was just like my dad. My dad caught the acting bug at 8 years old. Well, I bought Jonah a drum kit when he was 8. It was like a mistake in that he never stopped hitting those drums, and he's just got very good on it very fast. And then I got him a guitar when he was 11 and became quite proficient, but he wouldn't do any homework. It was impossible. But I had no problem getting him to his guitar, class or guitar teacher, his drum tutors. He had a lot of great mentors, but he was an absolute failure in school. He was just impossible to get him to do any work whatsoever. About 7 years ago, he got a call. There was a band on tour in Europe, and they needed somebody right away. They had a kind of a personal emergency, and he flew to Rome, and he played his first gig with a small punk band out of Orange County called The Offspring. And I'm just joking. The Offspring are huge, and I was huge
for like years. And
I mean, I'm a huge fan of theirs. When they really hit it big on their, with their album Smash in 1994, I was a huge fan, and Jonah was 2 years old.
Exactly, yeah.
But when he was a teenager, I was turning him on to them, because I just loved them so much. And through a mutual friend, he got that gig, and he was on tour with them for a little while in Europe. He's been with them ever since. He's phenomenal with them. They love him. We love them. They're a great band. It's Dexter and Noodles, and Todd and Brandon. They're like a family. They're a very tight-knit group. They've been all over the world. They're in South Africa right now. They're going back to South America. Yeah, I mean, he's done very well with them. So we're very proud of him. And his mother and I, whenever we can, we try to fly out to wherever they are to watch them play. And I'm the idiot on stage left where Jonah stands, jumping around. It's nutty. I mean, it's so ridiculous. His mother and I still, and even Jonah, we can't believe he's in the band. It's just been so great.
Amazing. That is so freaking cool. And the fact is that, he was 2 years old, you know what I mean, when they were performing, and now he's such an integral part, and he's touring the world, being a part of it, and, filling these stadiums and everything with, thousands and thousands of folks.
Oh yeah, in South America, they play these music festivals to 100,000 people. 100,000. Wow. It's nuts. They love American music. They love American rock, and he's very, he's really grown with them. He's a real professional. And this is what, my dad recognized this in Jonah early on. I mean, my dad, Jonah used to play with my dad when he Skyped into some of these Star Trek conventions. Jonah would play backup guitar. My dad would sing Maiden Wine, this song that Spock sang in, Plato's Stepchildren, or
Yep.
one of those episodes.
Yep.
And I heard my dad say to Jonah, you're a true artist, just like my dad could see in Jonah what his own parents could not see in him.
Yeah.
And that was a very sweet reconciliation between them after my dad and I had reconciled our own relationship.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that, and I really appreciate the awareness I was given by reading your book, just about in regards to Al-Anon, and then also AA, just because the different steps of recovery, and also how you talked about making amends, and then how your dad was making the living amends. And it's just, also, I really appreciated too, when different scenarios would take place, you learn that, I mean, I think it happens to all of us, is where, you're in a situation, somebody cuts you off. It actually happened to me today. And it's like, you want to be really loud and demonstrative and just lash out. But you really learn to go with your second, I think, and forgive me for not quoting it specifically, but you're listening to your second thought over your first thought. And you're hitting the brakes. It's almost like you're pausing for 10 seconds. You're thinking it through. And then, what's going on in your mind is one thing, but what actually gets spoken is another. And I thought that was very, very insightful. And I think the other thing too is how these tools are not necessarily for folks that have addiction. It's just like folks that are dealing with everyday issues, maybe with relationships or just communicating. And you really can relate to that the way you express it. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, yeah, no, thank you, Roy. It's just 12-step recovery, basically, because, I'm an addict in recovery. I always will be. I've been sober for 21 years now. And when people piss me off, I don't do this.
Right.
I'm going to flip them off.
Sure.
I get pissed off very quickly. And the tools of recovery, a lot of them for me are trying to get a grip on my brain before I start acting out, before my mouth starts moving, or I start typing an email or a text message to somebody, giving them a piece of my mind. And we're trying to get out of the emotional situation and be a little bit more calm about how we react to stuff. And I had to use those tools with my dad, because he would do stuff that just pissed me off. And a lot of times he would be taunting. He would say very inflammatory things to me, because we were pretty much estranged for a while, and he would rather have a fight with me than be completely estranged from me. That was kind of his thing. And I didn't take the bait for a long time. I just let him have his way and hope that he just got off his chest and we might have an okay relationship. And it was a friend of mine in recovery who said, no, you should take, my dad wrote me this letter of complaints, just all his complaints about me and my character problems, a lot of it, which was true, incidentally. And a friend in recovery said, look, you should just take the letter and go, just say you're sorry for everything and see what happens. And that's when things started to change with him. But a lot of it had to do with me no longer reacting and engaging with him, because we've been doing that all my life for decades. And I could never argue with him. And, my dad actually warned me when I was 17 and we had our first big argument. He said, you're never going to win an argument with me for basically 3 reasons. Number one, I'm very verbal and loud. Number two, I'm a tough kid from the streets of Boston. You don't screw around with me. And number three, I'm rich and famous. I mean, try arguing with a pop culture icon. It's impossible to argue with a guy when he's got millions of people saying you're the greatest thing that's ever happened in my life, and I'm saying you're human, by the way, the most human, you know what I mean? Reminding him of that. So very challenging for me, but it was really 12-step recovery that allowed me to keep my cool, make my apology to him, and let go of my own issues with him. And that's when things started to change with us. And I have to say, my dad himself was ready to let go of all of his anger and resentment towards me. And that's when our relationship completely changed.
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to relate to that, I mean, it's so important. And it's almost, you can't, and it's something to remind where kind of reminder to myself too, when, in life, sometimes we get frustrated with individuals that may be close family members. Obviously, we're talking about your dad with yourself. And it's just that you almost want to change the individual, but you can't. And it's almost the acceptance of who they are and going with that. But the one person that you have the power to change is yourself. And sometimes it's so hard to remember that. And it really, again, it's very grounding, reading, your book and just bringing that to light. And it was definitely a learning experience. And it's something I think a lot of us, for the most part, not everybody, but I think a lot of us realize this and know this, but sometimes we really have to be reminded of it. And it's so true, because we get caught up in the moment where we get so frustrated, and you just want things to go a certain way, and it's almost like a controlling thing, but you can't change somebody else. And with that, it really came through very clearly in your read.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, Roy. I mean, that's a big part of recovery, is that we don't focus on we don't have control over, people, places, or things. We don't have control over how other people act. We only have control over ourselves, and changing ourselves is hard enough. The idea of changing another person makes no sense.
Right.
Really, it's just impossible. And it's not the way to go. Once I changed my attitude towards my dad and became much more forgiving and accepting of him. Acceptance is not approval. I mean, he did some stuff that was not, was out of line. I still believe that. I would never do to my kids, really. He would say just crazy shit because he did not have great modeling from his parents.
Right.
So I don't approve of that stuff, but I accept him for who he is. He did the best he could. And the fact, and I'm not going to change him. He's never going to change. But this is the weird conundrum about recovery. Once I changed my attitude about all that, he started to change.
Yeah. And he was not the person that he once was. And he was a different type of person than when you got to that point.
Exactly. The timing was right for him. He was at a different point in his life. His career was not his main focus anymore. He was semi-retired. He was more in tune with what was happening with the family, with, he had was in a new marriage to Susan. He was very happy with her. He had a stepson with her, and he was more focused on my sister and I and our kids, the grandkids. He was more family oriented. So I got him at a very good time. And then I talk about in the book, when I had some personal tragedy I had to deal with, my dad was my go-to guy. I mean, that's a living amends. The guy just showed up for me. He never apologized. That really was not in Leonard's vocabulary. He was not the kind of guy. He was very tough guy, very single-minded kind of guy in that respect. I mean, the fact is, I try to make clear in the book, is my dad was a very talented man. He's a true artist. He's a Renaissance man. He could do almost anything. He was very smart for a guy who had very little formal education, but he had a lot of obstacles in terms of parenting. He just did, and that's what I had to come to accept about him. But in the end, he really overcame a lot of that and was the dad I needed him to be. That's what I talk about in the book, because of my own recovery and my different approach to dealing with him. And instead of taking him on and thinking I could beat him at his own game, argue him into submission, impossible.
And the fact that you were able to go to him when you were having your personal tragedy, and you even said, if it had been years earlier, you never would have done that. And then where you were at that point, you did. So again, and my condolences for your losses. And
Thank you.
And congratulations too on 21 years of being in recovery and being out of that area. So
as you were saying, Roy, I mean, I have to be reminded of this, about I can only change myself, and how do I change myself? And that's why I still go to meetings. I still go to 12-step meetings, because I need reminding constantly. My brain is just not wired that way. And I honestly thought that just as a pot smoker, I would go to AA and dry out, and then I would become a normie. I would use and drink like a gentleman. And I just got in the program and loved it so much. I've been modifying that plan every day for the past 18 years or so, because I just didn't feel like I wanted to. I was done, really, and I just love the program. I'm constantly learning from newcomers. I'm trying to be of service and help them in recovery. I'm a board member at Beit Teshuvah, this organization that that my dad introduced me to. It's a residential addiction treatment center and Jewish congregation, and my dad and his wife Susan supported them through their charitable foundation. And I never left after my dad introduced me to them. I mean, it's been a phenomenal experience. So, yeah, I mean, recovery is a big part of my life. And as you were saying, also, you don't have to be an addict or an alcoholic to be in recovery to use these tools to deal with stuff when, when relationships get challenging. Everybody is recovering from something,
Yep.
whether it's a failed marriage, in my case, or a failed career, which I've gone through repeatedly, or dealing with a loss, a personal loss, or some physical infirmity that you're recovering from, or a natural disaster, for God's, everybody's in recovery now in LA. We're all on tilt because of these fires. So, it's a very helpful to be connected to community, to share your experience with other people, to know you're not alone, to get the support that we need.
Exactly. And I wanted to say too, my heart goes out to everybody in California, to any friends and family that are experiencing having those experiences with the fires too, Adam. So just hoping that everybody, in your realm is, doing as well as they can be in regards to that. I know it's been horrific just seeing how that just kind of just unfolded in a matter of days, and the catastrophe. It's almost like apocalyptic in, seeing those photos and pictures, and it's really like something out of, I love sci-fi, but not in, real world. And it's just, my heart, goes out to the folks and that are there in California with those experiences.
Thank you. Yeah. Very, very challenging time for everybody knows somebody who lost a home or had to evacuate or is displaced. And, the fires are not over. And we're having, we have there's more forecasts for high winds coming up this week. I mean, and we just had a drought for the past 2 years. So it was, the perfect storm for this to happen. And it was apocalyptic. I mean, you went outside and the world was weird. It was like not being on planet Earth anymore. It was very otherworldly and just devastating. It's going to take some time for recovery.
Yeah. I just want to share some of the comments that have been coming through. Carolyn Miller, she's saying, I especially enjoyed Leonard Nimoy's Boston. Having grown up taking numerous trips there, it resonated with me as well. On most recent trips there, somebody briefly conversed with me about Leonard, which made for a special moment. And Bonnie comments, said, your dad wrote several poetry books that were unabashedly romantic and sentimental. How do you reconcile this with his otherwise stoic and enigmatic personality?
Well, it's hard to reconcile, frankly. I mean, my dad had took some very good photographs, and he wrote a number of books on poetry. I mean, again, this is my uncle used to say, you can take the boy out of Boston, you cannot take Boston out of the boy. I mean, all the way my dad hustled on the streets of Boston, he was hustling when he got to LA, and then when he broke through with this role with Mr. Spock, the hustle was still on. He was making these personal appearances, he was recording these records, and then he was writing these books of poetry. And it's very hard to reconcile sometimes. I mean, there's like two sides of Leonard Nimoy. That's an album, by the way, The Two Sides of Leonard Nimoy. Because he would write books about love poems, and then he would write me emails saying unconditional love is a fantasy. I don't believe in it, and and that's why we have a failed relationship. And it's like, well, he actually wrote me, and I talk about it in the book. He wrote me an email saying, we've never had a meaningful relationship. We never will, because I don't believe in unconditional love. It's like, wait, this is the guy who wrote, wait a minute, I have a copy here somewhere. It's like, I don't know where it is. Anyway, this is the guy who wrote You and I, the guy who wrote all these poetry books. I mean, come on, man.
No, exactly.
All I can say is, I can't make sense of it. Can you, Mr. Spock? Can you make any sense of that? No,
you can't. Sherry's asking, did your dad take acting classes?
Yeah, my dad saved up money and sent it to the Pasadena Playhouse, which is in Pasadena. And when he got out here, he discovered it was not a very serious acting school. There were a lot of guys there. This is 1949. This is about 4 years after the war, and there were a lot of guys there on the GI Bill. They were getting government, subsidy or some kind of compensation or pension, but they had to prove if you were in school, you were subsidized by the government. So to prove they were in school, they enrolled in this acting class just to be have attendance taken and then split. I mean, it was not a serious class. So my dad found his way to Jeff Corey's acting class. Jeff Corey was a character actor in the 40s and 50s, was in some classic episodes. I mean, he's in an amazing Superman episode, that I just was one of my favorites. Jeff was in, and he was blacklisted. He stopped working because someone accused him of, they wanted him to name names and he refused to do it, of people who were in the Communist Party. So he was teaching class, and Dad ended up in his class until Jeff started working again in two of my favorite films, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Little Big Man. And then my dad took over those classes. So yeah, Dad was in acting class, and he had a lot of interesting people in those classes as well. And I just, a side note, I've got to share this, Roy, that my dad many years ago, I can't remember the exact date, he calls me up and he says to me, Adam, do you know a guy named Owsley Stanley? And I thought, okay, this has got to be a trick question, because Owsley Stanley was the guy who mixed up the LSD for the Grateful Dead. Okay, and I'm like, okay, is he going to start a fight here about the dead and the drug culture thing? I don't know where this is going. Yeah. And Owsley had just died in a car accident, I think, in Australia, and there was an obit of him in the New York Times about his history with the Grateful Dead, because he was also recording them, which was kind of groundbreaking. He recorded all these early performances. And I was like, yeah, I know, Owsley Stanley. And my dad says to me, well, I knew him because he was in my acting class.
Jeez, wow.
And he came to me in around, in 65 or so, or 66, and said to me he was leaving class to go to San Francisco to work with a rock band, Grateful Dead.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, that was my dad's career in teaching acting class and Herb Alpert was in the class, and Bobby V. There were a lot of guys in the class. So yes, Leonard was definitely taking classes, and which, and a lot of his lesson plans I used when I was studying acting to become a director. And a lot of those lessons, I'm sorry?
I was gonna say, did you studied with, I remember reading the book, didn't you study with Jeff Corey too?
I did, because Jeff was semi-retired when I got to him. I was really disenchanted with the legal profession. He invited me to come out to a class in Malibu he was teaching at Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock from 10 to 1. And I never left. I was just too turned on by what was going on. It was just too much fun. So, that was very instrumental, working with my dad and talking to him about how to break down a script, using my dad's notes from his acting class to help me with my education as a director. And a lot of that stuff I started using when I was teaching directing and acting and filmmaking at the New York Film Academy, when I was there for almost 8 years. So it all comes around.
I have to say, I enjoyed in the book too, when you're talking and you're dealing with your students, and essentially you tell them not to use audio, not to use the mic, tell the story through visual. It's just that there's so much that can be conveyed because with that, and that I thought that was just, it was just, something I took away, which I thought was pretty true and pretty amazing.
Yeah, but again, straight out of the Leonard Nimoy School of Directing, if you cannot tell the story visually, if you can't find visual cues to help tell your story, then you're not doing your work as a director. Because anybody can shoot people talking. Anybody can film people talking. That's the easy part. The hard part is figuring out how do you visually stimulate people to understand what's really going on in the story. And great filmmakers do it, and that's why, you see it in The Godfather and The Graduate and Clockwork Orange and all these other great films. These guys know that you've really got to, there's a visual style and sense that lends itself to the story, that helps tell the story. And that's what I'm trying to convey to my students. And that's what my dad, number one, tried to convey to me.
Just want to say hi to James Michael Avalos. He's also joining us from Australia. He just jumped on quickly. He said, quickly saying hello. I'm stuck at work, but I'll have to watch when I get home. Good day, Roy and Adam. So thanks for tuning in. We appreciate that. Dave Rash is tuning in also. He's saying hello. He's tuning in from Florida. And Vince is saying, will your book tour bring you back around to the East Coast, New Jersey specifically? It would be great to meet you.
Well, Vinny, I was in New Jersey 3 times over the past couple months. I don't know if I'm coming back. I'm going to be in Florida in March, in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. I was just in Margate City, Florida, down near Atlantic City. I was just in very close to Asbury Park, near the coast. On the New Jersey coast. And I was in Edgewood, New Jersey. I don't know that I'm coming back in the immediate future. It might happen. Look at my website, adamnimoy.com. You can see there where I'm going to be appearing over the next several months. I'm going to be in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm going to be in Colorado Springs, back in Florida. I'm going to be virtual on a number of places in, where am I? I'll be on a virtual presentations for people at Cape Cod in Massachusetts, Roslyn Heights, New York, Cincinnati, Ohio. But mostly I'm going to make actual appearances in Fort Lauderdale, Miami Beach, Miami, and Boca Raton in Florida. Again, if you want to order the book, look online. You can find it, and any other interviews I'm doing or personal appearances should show up there as well.
Yeah, and while we're saying that too, I'm going to put that up on the screen, Adam, just so that everybody can be made aware, and I'll share that information that you just said. So if you can go to Adam's website for that information, and again, it is www.adamnimoy.com. In regards to ordering the book, you can order it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also bookshop.org. And that information is on your website, and then also with the listings of the different areas that you will be at. I'm just going to share a couple more comments. I know we're kind of going over a little bit, and it's just been wonderful talking with you, Adam. I'm just going to share a couple more comments. Henry said, "Bravo, Mr. Nimoy, for your recovery. I wish you continued success." Sue said, "Adam, that's really heartening to hear that the change and acceptance that you were able to be effected a change and reconciliation with your father. Thank you for sharing that with us." And let me see here. I think let's see. Adam, I'm wondering if another book might be possible, something like Leonard Nimoy acting and directing using his notes and teaching concepts. With that said, Adam, and I'll piggyback off of William's comment. Do you have any upcoming projects that you can share with us, or is there anything in the works? And also addressing William's comment to you too.
Well, there are a lot of things in the works. Stay tuned. I can't talk about them right now.
Okay.
There'll be announcements forthcoming on my website, or sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get all the latest information. The idea of writing a book on directing is definitely something that's crossed my mind many times, and I really should think about doing it because a lot of what my dad taught me, I used to great effect in directing TV. I mean, my dad was a very collaborative director. It was a lot about working with the actors, working with the crew, the cast and crew, and just good storytelling, And they're very valuable lessons. I think I made quite a big impact at the film school with those lessons, and a lot of it I took straight from him. He was really, really good at his craft, and I was really lucky to have him help me personally make the transition. I mean, the first really big milestone for me was making the Outer Limits episode with him. We made that remake of iRobot.
Yes.
And I had a lot of help from him on that, in helping with the writing and helping how to shoot the damn thing. He was very courteous to me on the set. I would set things up and he would take me aside and make suggestions to me, whispering in my ear, not in front of everybody, so that it looked like all these great ideas came from me. I mean, that was a turning point in my whole career, was making that episode. So yeah, there was a lot to be gleaned. There was a lot of wisdom from my dad that I would care to share, and it may come. I think it's a good idea. There's just other things that are a priority for me right now.
Sure, no, that's totally understandable, and I'm crossing my fingers that you do follow through with all of those things. And I cannot say enough about your book. And again, The Most Human. It's an excellent read. It's very in-depth, very personal. And I want to thank you so much for coming to be on the show, Adam. It was such a pleasure to meet you virtually. I hope to have the opportunity to meet you in person one day, hopefully in the near future when you're doing your tours, and I get to connect with you in person. It would just be it'd be nice.
Roy, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I just want to sign off by saying to all of our friends out there, live long and prosper.
Thank you so much, Adam. Take care, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick shout outs just for really quickly, and I will come back. Again, thank you again, Adam.
Bye, Roy. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. It was wonderful to have Adam be a part of the show. I'm just going to do the shout outs really quickly. If you have any last minute comments, you can please post them through. And just to give everybody a shout out here, I just want to shout out to my friend Bill Scarrato, who's out there, and for Country Gate Playhouse. And that is in Belvedere, New Jersey. If you are in the Phillipsburg, Belvedere, Harmony, New Jersey area, you can go to Countrygate's website, which is www.countrygate.org. And then also Bill's website is www.billscarrato.com. And also there's an upcoming murder mystery that is going to be taking place at the Belvedere Manor on February 8th. And you can get tickets by calling 610-248-7285. Also, want to give a shout out to my friends Mike and Mary Beth at Sci-Fi Distilled. They will be back this Wednesday to talk about Gravity on their show, and that's at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, a shout out to my son Ryan for Run by Ryan, Empower Your Run. And you can sign up for information by just going to his website, which is www.runbyryan.com. It's free. There are different levels if you want to progress into that. So definitely check it out. And Ryan, talk about passion. He's very passionate about his running, and which I am tremendously proud of him about. And also just a shout out to my friend Warren Friedrich and I. We are doing a Space 1999 podcast, and we just released episode number 13, which is Collision Course. And this is released on every Sunday. So we are discussing these in great depth. So definitely check that out. And then also a shout out to my friend and co-host, Mr. Ross Amico. Ross has 3 shows that he does. Picture Perfect on Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. He also does Sweetness and Light Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and The Lost Chord Saturday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can find out information by going to Classic Ross Amico on Facebook. And then if you want to listen to the shows, you can go to kwax.uoregon.edu. And speaking of Ross and I will be back this Friday, which is going to be January 24th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to be talking about the classic 1984 film, Dune. So we wanted to give a nod to David Lynch, who passed away this past week. So we will be discussing that. So stay tuned for that. And then also I'm going to be welcoming back to the show my friend Jeffrey Morris. He will be joining next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about the Eagle Obsession. So there we go. And again, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has tuned in. If you have not already done so, I would just ask that you please, especially if you enjoyed the show, please on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. There is no cost associated with it, but would love to have your subscription, especially if you're enjoying the show. And then also with Facebook, if you have not already and you are enjoying the show, please make sure to follow and like. Again, there's no cost associated with that. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. And it was such a pleasure to meet with Adam Nimoy. And again, my sincere thanks to my dear friends Bonnie Moss and Edward Thrower for connecting me with Adam Nimoy. It was just a great time tonight, and the time went very, very quickly, and I was trying to extend it a little bit, but I know he's got a schedule. So again, thank you both for helping me connect with him. And as I always like to say as well, live long and prosper. Take care, everybody. Have a great night, great week ahead. If you're in the Northeast, especially in the New Jersey, New York area, stay safe. Connecticut, because we are getting snowed upon right now. So stay warm, everybody, and take care. Thanks again.